TV Crazy Man here. In this video, I run down the most wacky, different, and unusual television westerns of all time, some of which you may have never heard of or completely forgotten about. Get ready for a massive tornado, martial arts, time travel with Jim West, a lost Tim Conway western, and more Gilligan's Island than you thought could possibly be connected to westerns. Hang on, partners, it's about to get strange.
It's gonna be one of those days.
Oh, and along the way, of course, we'll find lots of goofs and fun facts. Naturally. The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. was a western that lasted for 27 episodes between 1993 and 1994. It starred Bruce Campbell as the main hero and featured a lot of appearances by John Astin from the Addams Family, who played a nutty professor on the show.
You're playing the folk beer counter gambit, huh? You're really feeling your oats today, huh? Working on a new kind of balloon. It uses hydrogen for lift. A little unstable. All the humanity!
Yeah, you have to know a little bit about history to get that one.
I'll stay here and protect the women. I think we're going to step back a bit.
The series was sort of a tribute to old movie serials, which brings to mind Indiana Jones every time I watch it. But the show also had a great sense of humor.
He touched Pete's piece. Nobody touches Pete's piece.
I call them day glasses. Warden threw a party in the county jail. Prison band was there. They began. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I love any show that's got an Elvis impersonator. Like a bush. Coincidentally, in 2002, Bruce Campbell would play an older man claiming to be Elvis who fights a mummy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Brisco had a lot of sci-fi elements that would have made the Wild Wild West series jealous.
Oh boy.
A reoccurring item was a mysterious orb that could give those that touched it mysterious powers or miraculous healing. It could also turn a guy into a monster. Or worse. The show had a lot of fun stories and a cool musical theme that fit perfectly, done by Randy Edelman. Julius Carey played Lord Bowler, who starts out as the rival bounty hunter to Brisco. His character sort of reminds me of Mr. T in the Old West.
Robber Baron butt-kissing Brisco hide.
He does a lot of yelling in the series. Oh, and it's no wonder the series reminds me of Indiana Jones. It was developed by Boehm and Hughes, a duo that had worked on the script for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Fox told them to use a movie serial tone. You know, I think they should make a big screen movie of Brisco. It could be epic.
You don't want to do that.
I know these days there's a good potential that they might mess it up, but hey, it's worth a shot. Brisco only got one season. He deserves more adventures. Now, even though it was a fun show to watch that had a lot of action and adventure, it did have a few goofs in it.
Oh, come on.
In the very first episode, Brisco appears to have his hands tied behind him as he's about to be hung. After the hanging rope is shot and cut, he rides off, hands untied.
That's hogwash.
In the episode, No Man's Land, Brisco winds up hurt and having his gun taken away by a lady sheriff from Star Trek. Then, of course, bad guys arrive into town that is filled only with unarmed women. Well, except for a couple of guns. It's a good thing they have a town ordinance against guns.
We never were much for ordinances.
Anyway, so Brisco can't get to his gun because the bad guys end up with the key to the safe that has all of the guns from town. So, therefore, Brisco has to use sneaky means to take out the bad guys. Makes sense so far. Happy with himself, Brisco walks out, but without getting the bad guy's gun. Makes me wonder, maybe he was distracted by something. Now here's his second chance. Surely he got the bad guy's gun that time. Come on, Brisco. Well, third time's the charm. Oh, it doesn't matter, he's got the key to the safe with all the guns in it anyway now. According to the show, Brisco County Jr. was supposed to have graduated from Harvard. I wonder, did they teach strategy in Harvard?
Why do you spend so much time asking questions that have no answers? That's not important.
You know, this guy looks like he's looking for something. Maybe it's the modern day streetlight above him in the shot.
It's gonna be one of those days.
In the episode, Mail Order Brides, Brisco is chased by two bulls. One is real and the other one is totally fake.
It's certainly a lot of bull.
Why blow up about it?
Somebody in there. Rango, there's nobody in there. Captain, I'm sure there's somebody in there. What was that? Well, it looks like it was a lamb.
This one fits under Amazingly Wacky Westerns. You may not remember or you may not have heard of it before.
I never heard of you, Rango.
Well, he never heard of me.
I wish I could say the same thing.
But Rango debuted in 1967 and starred Tim Conway as a bumbling Texas Ranger. I just heard of it the other day thanks to a comment in one of our community posts. I got to watch a couple of episodes so far, and as far as I'm concerned, it's hilarious. It's very sad it only got 17 episodes. According to what I read from a couple of different sources, TV Guide ranked this series as number 47 in the 50th worst shows of all time, which tells you right there it's a great show. I mean, critics never get anything right. This was Tim Conway's first attempt at a series of his own right after he just finished McHale's Navy. You know, it's interesting to me how much trouble Conway had with getting a successful series on his own, considering his amazing comedic talent.
Hey, want to know something funny? About a week ago, I had the same idea. Hey, want to know something funny? Got it on the line.
All right, go for it. See that guy on the end? Gonna beat by a mile. Well, I'll be going now.
Rango even had an awesome theme song sung by Frankie Lane, the same guy who sang theme songs for classic films like 310 to Yuma, Gunfight at the OK Corral, Blazing Saddles, and the TV theme for Rawhide.
Rango, Rango, Rango.
Television series Rango. This is Mr. Tim Conway and friends. Tim?
And this happens to be Guy Marks, who plays Pink Cloud.
Let's go, Pink Cloud.
But I can't. I really can't.
Why not?
I got strict orders from my mother. I should never play in the streets.
Guy Marks played Rango's well-spoken Indian companion. Ranger with an Indian friend. Where have I heard that one before?
From San Antonio to the Rio Grande.
This is Norm Alden. He plays Captain Horton in the show.
Norman Alden played Rango's boss. I always remember him as the voice of Aquaman for the first couple seasons of the Super Friends, but he appeared in way too many classic TV shows to even list on this video.
All right, boys, come on, follow me.
Dusty's Trail aired in syndication from 1973 to 74. It was basically a what if Gilligan got stuck in the Old West scenario. It starred Bob Denver and Forrest Tucker, who sort of replaces the skipper, Alan Hill Jr. Although I have to say that Forrest Tucker and Bob Denver are a couple of my all-time favorites, it just seems like it would have been better to, either team up Denver with Alan Hill Jr. or Tucker with his F-Troop pal Larry Storch.
Any questions?
Dusty's Trail includes a rich couple, a banker and his wife,
Ready when you are, Carter.
Then tally-ho!
a smart guy, civil engineer,
If this chemical does just half of what it's supposed to do.
a dance hall girl, and a farm girl.
And your hair. And your muscles.
I think it's in the other arm.
If the farm girl looks familiar to you, that's because she was one of the sisters from Petticoat Junction, actress Laurie Saunders. The blonde who played the dance hall girl, actress Janine Riley, was also one of the sisters on Petticoat Junction for the first 2 seasons. Now obviously they were really going for a Gilligan's Island theme here. I wonder why they didn't just reunite the cast of Gilligan's Island for this.
Why do I ask so many dumb questions?
No, I bet it would have went for at least 3 seasons and millions of reruns if they had, instead of just the 1 season. And I bet you've probably already guessed that it was created by Gilligan's Island creator Sherwood Schwartz.
Understand?
Yeah, now that you've explained it.
It features a lot of Gilligan-like scenarios. Even an escaped gorilla shows up. Well, a guy dressed up like a gorilla that's supposed to be a gorilla, but it's really a guy in a suit. Well, kind of like this fake bear. Which normally I would say is a goof, but when they trotted the bear out in women's clothing, then I realized I was just supposed to go with it. But there's definitely something really off about this tornado. It kind of looks like just sort of a black ink spot that just sort of gets moved around on top of the film a little bit.
They got me!
I guess the only thing that sort of gets to me is that there's just not enough slapstick. There's some, just not nearly enough.
He got me. Right in the gizzard.
Gizzard?
Yeah, gizzard.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an interesting show, but just not nearly as good as Gilligan's Island or F Troop, I have to say.
That's your problem, and you stuck with it.
Speaking of F Troop, that Western series gives new meaning to zany and offbeat with a cast of characters, guest stars, and scenarios you just wouldn't believe. It gave new meaning to the term Wild West. F Troop only lasted 2 seasons with 65 episodes, but it's been running in syndication pretty much ever since it went off the air. The show had good enough ratings for another season, but apparently the studio wasn't happy with the added cost of producing the second season in color. And Warner Brothers' new owners at the time thought it was wasteful to use so much of the Warner Ranch for a single 30-minute show. F Troop is the story of Corporal Agarn and Sergeant O'Rourke, who run an illegal saloon underneath the nose of Captain Palmerton, who's in charge of Fort Courage that houses the worst soldiers in Army history. The series begins shortly after the Civil War.
But this time fate takes a hand. An excess of pollen fills the air. A hero who sneezed.
Did you recognize the narrator's voice as William Conrad, narrator for Bullwinkle and Rocky? A man who was famous for his great narrative voice and his detective show, Cannon, and the series Jake and the Fat Man. He also voiced Matt Dillon on the radio show for Gunsmoke and the Lone Ranger in the 80s animated series.
A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty high of silver.
Get down!
Abruptly ceased retreat and reversed it to victory. And so within a matter of days, victory came to the Union forces. So it was planned he'd command F Troop.
Captain Palmerton, played by Ken Berry, was considered a hero, the scourge of the West, even though his heroic deed was the result of a sneeze. Captain Palmerton possessed amazing acrobatic abilities on top of being extremely clumsy.
Zing!
There we go.
But he was also very lucky, as if there was a method to his madness. Forrest Tucker played Sergeant O'Rourke, who illegally owned a saloon while being in the Army. He was the brains of the show and the fort. Without him, Fort Courage would have fell apart.
I think that makes you a bigger man than I am.
Well, as long as you want to put it that way, yeah.
Sergeant O'Rourke was a man of business. Could he help it if almost everything he was doing was against Army regulations? He improved relations with Indians by allowing the Hockaways to make booze for his saloon.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
True.
Yes, Sergeant O'Rourke was a shining example of what a businessman can accomplish in America.
Have you ever known me to suggest anything underhanded or unethical or unfair?
How come we have reveille at 10 o'clock?
I love how Sergeant O'Rourke handles the captain when he asked why are they having reveille like 3 hours later than they're supposed to.
Yo, but the captain is forgetting there's a 3-hour time difference.
Larry Storch played Corporal Agarn, Sergeant O'Rourke's business partner, who was a bit dumber than O'Rourke.
Who says I'm dumb?
Agarn was true blue and loyal to a fault, but he could get emotional at times.
Happy New Year!
Agarn, where are you going?
To spread the word in that temple of wickedness!
Agarn could really get caught up in the moment. I remember now he's a partner in the saloon business, O'Rourke Enterprises.
Repent, you sinners, repent! Sit down with that bottle of demon
When Agarn commits to something, though, he really commits. Like when Harvey Korman came to visit.
Right, Corporal? Jawohl, mein Herr! Because that is the way we do things in Prussia! Glory be!
Or when he joined the temperance movement. Or decided that he'd rather be an Indian instead of a soldier. He did have a great way with words, though.
Not during our month-end sale. I said, here comes Jane, and she looks pale.
What's going on?
You got your shack back!
The almost blind lookout was Vanderbilt, played by Joe Brooks.
What kind of duty does this man have?
He's our lookout.
Comanches, or Apaches, or somebody! There's millions of it!
Trooper Duffy, played by Bob Steele, was always recounting tales of his time fighting at the Alamo with Davy Crockett, even though nobody actually survived the Alamo.
Very interesting in your service record.
What's that, sir?
You were killed in action.
James Hampton played Dobbs, the bugler, who of course was a terrible bugler. Wrangler Jane, played by Melody Patterson, was always trying to get Captain Palmerton to marry her. Frank Takova played Chief Wild Eagle, and he often got the funniest lines of the show.
You see, voting is one of the processes of American democracy. Oh, voting means taking land away from Indians. You want Indian attack? We give you Indian attack. Cost you $20. Ora manakura. Unarakatembu. Peace-loving Akawi fight Indian? That's your job.
And then there was a time he predicted a political scandal that wouldn't happen for decades.
I was told you even smoked a peace pipe.
I didn't inhale.
Don Diamond played Wild Eagle's right-hand man, Crazy Cat. Craze, as Agarn called him, was always waiting impatiently to get his chance to be chief of the Hokawis.
Over my dead body.
That's when I become chief.
How did the Hakawis get their name?
Did you ever wonder how the Hokawis got their name?
Why'd you ask?
Many years or moons ago, the tribe left Massachusetts because the Pilgrims were, ruining the neighborhood. The tribe traveled west many miles until one day the tribe fell over a cliff. And then the medicine man said to Wild Eagle's ancestor,
I think we lost. Where the heck are we? Hostile? What is hostile?
The Hokawis were a peace-loving tribe. They were more interested in love than war, and they barely even knew what the meaning of the word hostile was.
Unfriendly. No friends.
You very hostile Indian.
One of the ongoing problems that F Troop faced was that doggone cannon. It would never fire unless you kicked it, and then it would always, usually hit the watchtower, or maybe the water tower, or maybe Jane's store window way down into town.
Good evening.
Going beyond just wacky, zany comedy, the F Troop also featured a ghost and possibly a vampire.
What are you, some kind of nut?
The West Goes Ghost is sort of an interesting precursor to Tucker and Storch's future series, The Saturday Morning Ghostbusters. At the end of that episode, a real ghost rides by Captain Palmerton and Wrangler Jane. Well, it's supposed to be real. F Troop's other very spooky episode, guest starring the great and very scary Vincent Price, was entitled V is for Vampire.
Good evening.
Vincent Price plays an immigrant from Transylvania. Naturally, he rides in a hearse, has pale skin, and talks to a crow he calls brother.
I am Count Sforza from Transylvania.
Almost the entire episode, we are left guessing as to whether or not Price's character is actually a vampire or not.
Now that's what I call a paleface.
Well, that's why they call me Rongo. Everywhere I go, things go wrong.
And there was the X-Files-like case of Rongo Starr, who seemed to have an uncanny curse to cause bad luck to all those around him.
I hope not. Knock on wood. Like that.
A few years before the series Kung Fu, F-Troop even had a super samurai. Now ain't that something?
That's what I call a chop.
Next, let's check out some goofs from F-Troop. In the episode Don't Look Now, one of our cannon is missing. I wonder if that's a goof. Anyway, in this episode, O'Rourke has Lynthia Cowies, the troop cannon, for their moon festival, and they don't want to give it back. However, in the establishing shot, the one they use in every episode of the fort, when they come back from the commercial, the cannon is clearly seen sitting in its usual spot next to the flagpole.
I not give up cannon. Listen, it's only a cannon.
In the episode O'Rourke versus O'Reilly, a fight breaks out in the saloon, and it's obviously way too large to be inside O'Rourke's. This is one of those many cases where they use stock movie footage. It works, but it's weird when you notice how much smaller it is in the saloon after the fight is over. I guess we better head on down the trail to the next Western. Maverick was mostly a straightforward Western that kept a good sense of humor throughout, probably a little more than most Westerns, but there was at least two completely wacky off-the-wall parody episodes that just really stood out. One episode featured a parody of Bonanza entitled Three Queens Full. The other episode, entitled Gunshy, took on Gunsmoke. I read from one website that James Arnez thought that the parody episode was in poor taste, but I thought it was hilarious. Of course, you never know about these things that you read on the internet, whether they're accurate or not.
How many men you shot this month for aggravating you a lot less than he has?
This episode had its own funny version of Chester, Doc, Miss Kitty, and Matt Dillon, named Mort Dooley.
Shall I stand a little closer, Marshal?
If you'd have been just 20 feet closer, you'd have got him.
You'd have got him 6 times, Mr. Dooley.
Marshal Dooley can't stand Maverick, and he keeps trying to run him out of town. Using friendly persuasion, of course.
Well, you're not going to shoot me.
That's what I usually do.
Now get ready and see if you can spot the goof. Did you catch it? Okay, see if you can catch it now. I mean, what a place to park your car right in the middle of making a Western. Of course, you can never rule out time travelers, but you'd think somebody would have noticed that.
Right, Scott!
Of course, Maverick wasn't the only show to take a swipe at Gunsmoke. Gilligan's Island took their turn as well.
Miss me.
Wild Wild West, starring Robert Conrad and Ross Martin. West and Artemis ran into all kinds of unusual villains and circumstances that your average Western character never had to face. You might say they paved the way for Brisco County Jr.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wasn't meant to.
During the series, Jim West and Artemis would face ninjas, mad scientists like Dr. Lovelace, and in Season 2's The Night of the Lord of the Limbo, they faced an evil Ricardo Montalban. Not like Khan, more like an evil Mr. Rourke. He even sends West through a door that leads into the past, much like Rourke would do to others on Fantasy Island. Amazing as it was, West and Artemis had actually time traveled. The episode The Night of the Burning Diamond was really wild. It features a supervillain who, after drinking a formula of melted diamonds, acquires super speed, where he's so fast he becomes invisible to the naked eye.
It's that odd sound, almost like clicking.
So at super speed, when people talk, it sounds just like a Star Trek communicator to a speedster. And remember, this was a couple of months before Star Trek premiered.
Bridge, this is the captain.
Morgan Midas had to be one of the most powerful villains West ever faced, but he and Artemis ran into villains that would make Batman nervous.
How'd you like that? It's not possible.
The episode The Night of the Human Trigger guest stars one of my favorite actors, Burgess Meredith, as basically a Western supervillain who uses his genius-level calculations and well-placed explosions to start earthquakes. This episode aired just a little over a month before his debut as another supervillain, the Penguin, on the 1966 Batman series.
Little pendulum touches either contact.
Later, West is put into another trap set to explode if he even dares to take a deep breath.
Holy sonic booms!
But luckily, it doesn't go off when Burgess Meredith appears to trip over the line. And you could even hear the pendulum smack one of the metal contacts, which was supposed to set off the earthquake in the explosion. Intentional or not, either way, it adds humor to an already funny episode, which, being a very humorous episode to start with, they could afford to leave this scene in one way or the other. In the episode The Night of the Druid's Blood, comedian Don Rickles guest stars as a bad guy, villainous looking mustache and all. Too bad he can't keep the mustache on. Even funnier is how they gave him a close-up just as he starts to lose his mustache. I know it's possible it was a joke, but I don't think it was intentional.
That's pretty corny, pal. Yeah.
Rickles faces off against Conrad in a fight scene. I wonder how long it took before he yelled, "Cut! Where's my stuntman?"
You are insolent, aren't you?
Well, it probably didn't take long. Now a little trivia. There's a lot of connections between the Wild Wild West TV show and Gilligan's Island, believe it or not. On the episode The Night of the Murderous Spring, the recurring Wild West villain Dr. Lovelace is seen hanging out in Gilligan's Lagoon. They must have used a lot of fake trees that they could just move in and out easily, as the house in the background of the Wild West scene is hidden in the Gilligan's Island scene. Unless, of course, they moved that house back and forth. And here's another scene from that episode where Dr. Lovelace sinks in the same lagoon that Gilligan himself has sunk so many times before. Here's one from the episode The Night of the Sudden Death. The easiest way to recognize it is the falls that you see here. Don Wells, aka Mary Ann, was in the episode The Night of the Headless Woman. Jim Backus, aka Mr. Howell, was on the episode The Night of the Sabatini Death. Also on that same episode was Alan Hale Jr., aka the Skipper.
I'm going to spend a vacation all alone on a desert island. Jim, see ya.
Yes, they really did play the theme from Gilligan's Island on that episode. It's too bad they didn't get Bob Denver to do an episode. Kung Fu was an action-packed series that put martial arts into the Old West, starring David Carradine.
It binds one to the reality of oneself.
Kung Fu was part of the 70s martial arts craze. Never before was there an American series that blended Kung Fu to the Old West for an entire series such as this one, making it very unique among Westerns. It was an interesting show that lasted 3 seasons, but some of the more strange things that came out of the series were the goofs, and you know I love goofs. In the episode, The Ancient Warrior, it features Chief Dan George, best known for the outlaw Josie Wells.
Name's Josie Wales. I've heard of that name.
Who stars as the Ancient Warrior. In the goof, he lights a fire for a funeral scene for his son. It's a very solemn scene that becomes a little more difficult to take seriously when this modern-day fire extinguisher suddenly pops up. I guess even in the Old West, fire safety was important, enough to break the rules of the space-time continuum.
Great Scott!
Say, you don't think that had anything to do with the way fights always seem to be happening in slow motion on this show, do you? Check that out. Looks like a time traveler must have left behind a styrofoam cup.
Great Scott! I know, this is heavy.
Is it my imagination, or is reality itself bending? Check out all the signs that are reading backwards. Is that an electrical transmission tower in the Old West on the episode Superstition?
I do not know.
Could be.
In the episode Chains, there are further anomalies with time. If you look really closely, you can just make out a car going by. I wonder if Kane saw that. In the episode Blood Brother, a body is found in the swamp. But the crazy thing is, the covered up body is clearly breathing. Actors playing dead can often be seen still breathing, of course, but the weird thing is, as much as I appreciate realism in a show, was it really necessary to put a real person under that blanket? After all, we couldn't actually see their face.
Crazy, all of it's crazy.
Here's a fun one from the episode King of the Mountain. In this scene, the two men are fighting it out, all alone. There's no one around, except John Saxon, David Carradine, and John Saxon's stuntman. And here's the stuntman again, this time he's in the action. Also, I'm not sure what to think about that mustache. Saxon, of course, reminds me of Bruce Lee, whom he co-starred with on the movie Enter the Dragon. Many sources claim that Bruce Lee helped develop the Kung Fu series and was cheated out of the lead role. If this is indeed true, no offense to the memory of David Carradine, of course, but if this is true, that was a huge goof. I mean, to have the legendary Bruce Lee on this series would have doubled its lifetime earnings. Maybe they could have had both actors and made it a show about two brothers traveling around the West. On another point, if you were wondering how David Carradine could play a Chinese man, in the show he's only supposed to be half Chinese. This episode wins the award for the worst fake bird in television for 1973. Not only is the bird just a little stiff, but you can see the string holding it up. Hey, it's William Shatner disguised as a ship's captain on dry land. Is that coincidental or ironic? I almost didn't recognize him. In the episode, The Garments of Rage, there's an unidentified flying object in the air. Could this be a flying saucer or a jet that just broke through the time barrier? No, I'm thinking jet or flying saucer from outer space.
Yes.
There it is again in the episode of Lamb to the Slaughter. Is this ancient Chinese soldier carrying a walkie-talkie? Well, at least it's not a smartphone. Then I'd be worried.
Go now, grasshopper.
I'd like to mention a couple of shows I didn't get a chance to dive into, but were mentioned in recent comments in the community section of the TV Crazy Man channel. Best of the West, a Western comedy from the 80s with Joel Higgins from Silver Spoons, with appearances by Christopher Lloyd and one with Slim Pickens. And the 90s series Legend with Richard Dean Anderson from MacGyver. I hope y'all enjoyed this look at weird and unique westerns. Please don't forget to leave a comment, hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching and supporting this channel with your comments and likes. Y'all have a great day.
You were wonderful.
Shucks. Weren't nothing.